I never wrote any of my own papers in college. I always managed some sort of shortcut or backdoor or other exit out of it until one day I was finally caught. I had this writing teacher named Maishi Bernstein in college, and now everyone feared Maishi's class because he made you handwrite every single thing in his class. And I'll never forget this. On the first day of his class, he had written up on the board, "Write about what you know." Write about what you know. And at this point in my life, I really didn't seem to know much of a whole lot. But I turned in this essay to him, and he called me into his office to speak with him after. And as I was sweating, sitting there, nervous, he looked at me and said, "JD, you didn't write this." So I started talking quicker and quicker, trying to explain myself, make up some excuse. And as I was continuing to trip over myself, he stopped me and he said, no, JD, what I mean is you didn't write this, you typed it. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit before I ever got into this writing class and talk about the story that not only landed me there that day, but has actually landed me here in front of all of you right now and really shaped my entire existence as a person. Growing up in Los Angeles, California, I was a basketball player. And basketball was my entire identity, and it was pretty much the only thing I cared about, and the only person I really cared about was myself. I was selfish, cocky, self-centered, and focused on what was going on in my life. When after one of my high school games, this little girl who I'd never met before came up to me and said, "Hey, my little brother wants to meet you and play a game of basketball with you." And so I sort of stopped her and said, "Sure, I'll get around to it when I can. I'm pretty busy. I'm a pretty big deal. I don't know if you knew that." And she said, "No, it has to happen next week." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because my little brother Luke is only 6 years old, and he has something called sickle cell disease. And the last thing that he wants to do before he has to go into the hospital for a full year of isolation for a bone marrow transplant is meet you and play a game of basketball with you." Now, it is said that in life, when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear. And I had no idea that in my life, my greatest teacher would be a little 6-year-old boy with sickle cell disease. So I got together with Luke, and we played this game of basketball. And although he was about this tall, and I'm about this tall, he talked all this trash to me. Right, exactly. About how weak my left hand was, about how he couldn't believe I was so tall and I didn't dunk it more, how if I hadn't missed that layup in the game last night, I would have had 25 points instead of 23, and it was like non-stop. Yeah, true story. But what was so grabbing to me immediately in meeting Luke was, for such a young kid, the confidence, the personality, but also how much he knew about me in my life, every school that was recruiting me, all the things going on in my world. And I really did learn right away he was my biggest fan. So I threw Luke up on my shoulders at the end of the day, and we took this photo together, and he went his way and I went mine, and that was it. A few months went by, and I had this pulling thought to go and tell Luke about the news that I just committed to playing college and would be continuing my college basketball career. So I drove down to Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and I got in touch with Luke's father, and I met him in the hospital waiting room for the first time. He let me know, "JD, Luke hasn't been feeling very well lately. His bone marrow transplant's been really difficult, and he hasn't been able to get out of bed in weeks." And when I got in that elevator, and I went up to that 4th floor, and those doors opened, and I saw all of the other sick little kids in isolation, some even younger than Luke, my heart sank in my chest, and I couldn't believe the horror, the tragedy that so many young lives were facing. A healthy man wants 1,000 things, while a sick man wants only one. When Confucius said that, I think the idea really means that all of our lives, we think we have so many things going on, so many things we take for granted, when having our health and the opportunity to go and live is such a blessing. And I know for me, as I walked through that hospital, as I looked into the eyes of all of these kids, I thought to myself, the last thing any of these kids want to do is have to wake up in a hospital every day, and that's the only thing they're thinking about. But when I got to Luke's hospital room, I could see into his room before he could see me, and he had one single photo over his bed. And it wasn't a photo of me, it wasn't a photo of Luke and Matt Kemp, and it wasn't a photo of Luke and Steph Curry, and it wasn't a photo of Luke and Kevin Durant, but it was that photo of me and Luke the day we met and played basketball together. Luke being held by that cocky, selfish, self-centered, loud redhead. And I sort of felt this overwhelming amount of guilt and grief, thinking that I'd tricked this kid into thinking I was somebody, making him believe I was worthy of that praise and adulation, and I didn't think I deserved that. But I said in that moment, looking at that photo of me and him over his hospital bed, that I would do everything I could in my life to become that person one day. And as I walked over to Luke's hospital room, he saw me, and he lit up with the biggest smile I've ever seen in my life. And with all the strength he had in his body, he pushed himself out of bed, and with more IVs and monitors and things going through him, he walked up to the glass window that separated me and him, and he put his little hand up to it, and I put up mine, and I swore I'd never felt closer to someone in my entire life. Luke would make it out of the hospital, and he would come to watch me play in college, and we would eat pizza together, his favorite food, and we would celebrate birthdays together, and those next few years were some of the best years of my life. But Luke didn't have much longer with us. On September 14th, 2016, at the age of only 10 years old, Luke Bodden passed away from a stroke, and I was devastated. Luke's parents asked me to speak at his funeral, and I wanted so badly to meet this moment to share some of the memories and stories about Luke in his honor. So day and night, I worked hard trying to memorize all of the things that I wanted to impart to this audience of people that knew Luke and memorialize him in this powerful way. And when I got to that church that day, and I did everything I could to make my way up to that stage, when I looked out into that crowd, I saw all of Luke's little friends. And I just broke down in tears. I rained down tears, and I could barely get a word out, and I mumbled and I stuttered, and I was hardly able to say anything articulate. And I was so disappointed in myself for not being able to meet this moment. When I got back to my seat, and with my head between my knees, it was Luke's doctor that came up to me and he said, "You know, JD, there was really only one thing wrong with your speech today. The only thing wrong with your speech was that the entire world couldn't have been inside of this church to hear that story. Write about what you know." What I know is that Luke never complained. He was grateful even for his worst days. And he represented unity more than any person I've ever met in my entire life. What I know is that the last 2 words Luke ever told me in his whole life were to smile more. I write only because there is a voice within me that will not be stilled. Sylvia Plath says this, and I had no idea what was going on in my life after Luke passed away, but I knew his voice was somewhere inside me, willing me to keep going, to share our story, to find a different way forward. Hemingway also says, "There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at your typewriter and bleed." And that is exactly what I would go on to do. Day and night, I would sit down and decide, rather than typing the story of me and Luke, I would handwrite it. Hour by hour, minute by minute, day by day, week by week, month by month. I didn't tell a single person I was writing a story until I was finished. And I handwrote a 400-page book inspired by my friendship with Luke, a book that I'm holding right now. When I completed this, I wasn't really sure what to do with it, but I could only think of really one person that might be able to help me in terms of next steps and figure out where to go. So I got in touch with that famed, notorious arch nemesis of mine, Maishi Bernstein, once again. And I gave him a call, and we got together in this coffee shop, and when I walked into that coffee house, he sort of just looked at me and said, "You?" And I said, "Yes, me again." And with the same hand that I met Luke at that hospital window, I handed him this book. A few weeks later, would get a call from Maishi, and he told me, JD, I think this is the best book I've ever read in my life. Maishi would be right by my side through the entire publishing process, helping me get an agent, a cover designer, a publicist. And on September 14, 2018, on the 2-year anniversary of Luke's passing and the same year I graduated from college, my debut novel, Moonflower, was published. And what would happen next was just a bit of magic. I would go on to become a partner with NMDP. We are now working on a documentary about this story. This past summer, the story of Luke and I was nominated for an Emmy Award. I've gone on to travel the country telling the story of me and Luke to audiences everywhere. I was even invited by LeBron James' production company to speak to his entire staff about this story. And in 2024, I was invited to speak at what would have been Luke's high school graduation to address all of those same little kids that grew up with him as they were now being sent off to college. And most importantly, and what I'm most proud of to share with you all, is that Luke's family and I have never been closer than we are today. And we've gone on to start something called the Luke Strong Foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports children that are diagnosed with sickle cell disease. And we are one of the largest nonprofits in the world doing the work that we do today. Now, you are all writers. Whether you realize it or not, you write every single day. And some of you may even be writing books yourselves. But you write texts, emails, notes to friends, goals you want to achieve. And I'm here to tell you that rather than typing those things first, consider perhaps handwriting them. In 2007 at Dominican University, there was a study done that showed that those that handwrite down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them versus those that do not. Handwriting your goals adds this level of accountability that typing simply just does not have. And in 2015, there was a study done in Germany amongst preschool students where they taught half of the room by type notes and the other half by handwritten. And they showed in every single category that the students that learned from handwritten notes outperformed those taught by typed notes. I have 3 really simple lessons I would love for you all to take away and why I'm such a big advocate for handwriting. Number 1, it takes you away from technology. Technology, as we all know, is a constant distraction in our lives and something that can take away our focus from what we're really doing and the task at hand. And for me, it was an incredibly meditative and a cathartic experience, which helped me write my first book, Moonflower. Number 2, it allows you to physically see your progress, feel it. It has a tangible thing that you can touch and hold, and you can flip page after page and see all of the things that you've written, where it's not just a blinking screen that's popping up in front of you. And the third and final lesson is simply momentum. So often in life, we want to be perfectionists. We want to go back and rework and re-edit whatever it is that we've just written. But when you're handwriting, that's not so easy. You have to keep moving forward and following that page after page after page. And that's exactly why I feel I was able to accomplish my lifelong dream of writing a book. Martin Luther says that if you want to change the world, you must first pick up your pen and write. If it weren't for handwriting, I would have never been able to bring the story of me and Luke to life. So in all of your own lives, I want you to think about not just what it is you want to achieve or the goals you want to do, but think about your own stories, the experiences you've lived through, the Lukes in your lives, the people that have boosted you up and made you feel like you are something, because we all are so lucky to have those types of people around us. And when it comes to telling their story, think about what it is that you know. Think about what it is that they've taught you. And I hope you all will consider handwriting it, because the stories of all of your lives are much too important to be typed. Thank you.